Hi, folks. Tom Johnson Medlin here again. We are going to continue in our series on journaling with our third journaling class, journaling and life review. Now, life review is actually a very, very important part of the process that patients in hospice go through on a regular basis. I think we're all familiar with the idea of um, having your life pass before your eyes, and people talking about that quite frequently and saying, I saw my life go before my eyes, particularly when they're in emergent accident oriented situations where somebody could be killed, where they could die. And that is a process that kicks in and takes place. It's nobody's really sure what that is, but it has been spoken of quite frequently. And actually, when you find out you have a terminal illness and you're coping with that, you actually start to go through your life naturally and think about where you've been, because this great existential question has been posed to you, and that is, what has the meaning of your life been? And so this becomes a natural part of the process. And I would have to say that just like with these emergent or crisis oriented deaths, where somebody's life flashes before their eyes, I think the process of life review is actually our lives passing before our eyes, but over an extended period of time, because we know it's not going to happen like this second. And so it doesn't happen quickly. We can also prompt the process throughout our lives and do what the ancients always said, which was memento mori. Remember that you will someday die. And so, as a result of memento mori, live your life with the greatest capacity for love and virtue and grace and all of those good, estimable things that we hold so dear as people. So, today we're going to talk a little bit about how to use your journal to actually go through and do a life review, how to share with people where you've been and the components of your life so that they can see just how readily the stories are for you to tell and to offer to share up. So, part of the life review process was unfolding in my work over the many years in hospice, because of what patients and their families would bring up on a routine, regular basis, the things that they would discuss, the things that they would talk about, the questions that they would have about their life and the meaning that their life has had. And so I began to collect categories and conversations and just write them out on sheets of paper, basically putting them in columns to see if there was anything similar in this one to that one, or could you group them according to categories. And essentially, over the years, what we began to see is that there were categories. There was first the category of family. There were stories about family that were always coming up. There were then stories about friends that were always coming up and people that we have acquaintances with. There were also stories about people's beliefs or their faith or their spirituality. Those would come up. There were pithy little statements that people would make, and we called them the pearls of wisdom, things that people learned that they wanted to pass on. Then we started to recognize that during this time of reviewing our lives, that people were also having emotions about the illness that they had um, been diagnosed with and its eventuality of death. And so they began to wanting to talk about those things as they were doing life reviews. So we would always include those pieces into the conversation of how are things going with your illness, what has changed, what has that done to improve the quality of your life or change your understanding of meaning, and those kinds of areas. And then I think finally we also started hearing from people when they were telling stories about funerals. And so we thought, well, funeral planning is really a part of this life review process too. How do we take the things that have been vital, critical, and so important in all of our life and bring them to bear at that service that exists after our death? And so, having heard all of these things as a part of the story retrieval process that we went through, we put it all together and made a workbook. And we started using that workbook with patients and families. We got a grant from a foundation to make copies of it and send it out in the homes. And then eventually I approached my publisher and we published it as a book. And we called it Along the Road, excuse me. And so what I think what you would really benefit from having is access to these categories that we developed over the years because of patient and family input. And so what I've done is I've taken the workbook and the book and I've pulled all the questions and the categories out of both of them and put them on a handout here. So the handout is actually available with the person who recommended the journaling class to you, but it's also going to be seen here. We're going to go through it and talk about the questions. So it's really up to you, again, just like we did in the second class, it's really up to you to decide how you want to categorize this information that you're going to be putting down in your journal. You may want to just each day select a different theme or set of questions based on the categories and then write about it, or you may want to do a chronological piece to your journal that starts at the earlier phases of your life or the most early memories that you have in your life and then move forward to the present day. It's up to you. And you could leave whole sections, one for family, one for friends, one for faith, one for pearls of wisdom, one's for coping with my illness, and then also one for funeral plans. Again, your choice. You organize things the way that makes the most sense to you. Okay. So let me just start out, though, by going through the categories and listing out verbally the questions that we've decided were so important, so valuable for patients and families to share with one another. And just like in the second class, when we talked about leaving behind ethical wills, the process here should be the same. If you've written something down in a journal about someone, or if you've written something down in a journal because you want somebody to have this journal, then make sure that you also sit down with that person or those people and share the information verbally with them. It's good to have it in written form, but really it's so powerful to have our relationships developed and enhanced because of the work we're doing in a life review. And I can just see the conversations deepening, right? And relationships deepening because of the conversations that we have based on where we've been in our life and the stories we want to tell. So the first section, we want to take a look at our family areas in our life, the familial places in us. Who is our family? Where do they come from? Those kinds of questions, and how do we fit into them? So maybe first you would sketch out a family tree as best as you're able to. That would be a really wonderful thing to include in this portion of your journal. And it may take a bunch of pages. And then in addition to that, we talked about the vitality of our memory. So memories of births and deaths in your family, talk about them, write them out a little bit. What are the bigger or larger memories you have of your family? Like, were there any special trips or favorite foods? How about funny stories, favorite people that maybe hung out with the family but weren't really family? Those additional people that maybe you called tangentially aunts and uncles that were really not family, but who were those favorite people? Or how about favorite gatherings or favorite gathering places, secret recipes, things your family taught you? What are those things that your family taught you? What values and special lessons did you get from your family members? It's also relevant in this section to be able to write letters to people that are in your family. So you may want to write to somebody who's no longer alive and tell them what they mean to you and how they changed who you are. You may want to write to somebody who is alive. And again, if they are alive, write the letter, but then sit with them and share that with them. Just also, you may want to include here, when you're doing the family section, ethical wills that you would like to make for your family, right? Family only. But how about other family memorabilia? Is there an antique car that's been floating around through the family all these years? Is there a house at the beach? Is there a special, we talked about recipes, but is there a special recipe that really is your family's and has been kind of locked away in a secret vault somewhere? How about your parents? Describe them. How about your life partner, your spouse? Or how about describing your wedding or significant other events of when you met your spouse? How about your children and your intimate family members? So we're looking here not only as a family of your birth family early on in life as a child, but then also as we mature into adulthood, talking about our family as well. Describe other family members, those extended folks like aunts and uncles and grandparents and great aunts. What blessings have come to you in life by living in family, and what difficulties have come to you in life because of your family? Keep in mind, we all have difficulties, right? Every person on the face of the earth has conflict and has difficulty. So you're not unique, and there's no real reason to be embarrassed by the difficulties we've had, because I think everybody who is human speaks to the difficulties that they've had and the sufferings they've had in their own life. So, and then another section or another category will be friends. So, how about a list of your closest friends and how you met them? Or maybe you could divide it up into different sections, like my childhood friends were these, and here's how I met them. And as a young adult, here are my friends and how I met them. And then in midlife and later life, these have been my friends and how I met them. What have you done with those friends? Did you go on trips together? Did you spend time daily because you were at school together? Did you go for walks, or did you play on a sports team? Just talk a little bit about who they are and how you met, and how you stayed connected to them and what you did with them. What have you learned from your friends? What key stories do you want to share? And please feel free to put this on pause anywhere if you want to write down some of these um, prompts or these queries, these questions that we're using to help you decide on which portions you want to write about. Again, here, I would also do some letters to friends, either friends that have gone already, that have died, or friends that have moved away, or friends that are close. Write a letter. And again, if they're still alive, it would be really wonderful to sit with them and talk to them about the letter and perhaps share it with them. You might also want to share some ethical wills with your friends. And if you didn't see the session 2 or class 2, please go back and watch class 2, because it'll give you the full detail of what ethical wills are. What are some principles that your friends and your friendships have taught you? Then we move into the category of faith. Now, earlier on, faith used to be considered a part of a religion, right, or a denomination that one belonged to. But today, I think the world has taken on a more sense of faith being something that is spiritual, that involves invisible things that you cannot necessarily touch, with your hand or see with your eyes, but beliefs in any shape or form. There are also these major, deep, powerful, and almost seismic emotions that live in us. Like, there's a thing that's called awe that we all feel when we stand at the Grand Canyon. So awe is a part of spirituality, and so is wonder, so is radical amazement, so is grandeur, so is beauty. These are all things that are a part of a sense of spirituality, right? Ethics and morality are also a part of that too. So you don't necessarily have to belong to a religious organization to have a sense of spirituality or a sense of faith. If you do believe in God, how would you describe God? If you don't believe in God, how would you describe the universe? What is your favorite religious writings that you have read often in your life? Who are your revered teachers or saints in life? Is it Gautama Buddha? Is it Jesus? Is it Moses? Or is it somebody like Khalil Gibran? Or is it like Robert Bly? Or is it Naomi Shihab Nye? Or is it Maya Angelou? I mean, who is it that really is the saint or teacher in your life that comes from this sense of spirituality? How about fond memories of major events that you celebrated, either with religious community or family? How has illness changed your faith and your belief in God or a higher power? What are your hopes for life after death? How has faith or spirituality supported you or comforted you throughout life? Where have you worshiped, or where have you been most opened up to the deeper spiritual meanings of life? What have you learned about love? What have you learned about living? What have you learned about forgiveness? What have you learned about prayer? What have you learned and believe about death because of your sense of spirituality? Who have been your close spiritual friends and mentors? And what have these friends or mentors taught you? Have you had any special aha moments in life or theophanies? And what were they, and how did they open you? And what did they open you to? Then we have a section where we want you to talk about your life specifically, where you're going to talk about your childhood, where you lived, what schools and groups you belong to, what your hopes and dreams have been throughout life. How has your life had major themes? And if it has, what have they been? What have you been unable to accomplish in life that you had always hoped you would? How about your high points? Can you list those? What about low points? Can you list those? And then there's all of the favorites in your life. What are your favorite colors or your cars or favorite food or ice cream flavor, favorite songs, favorite movies, favorite actors, favorite books and authors, favorite people, favorite holidays, favorite trips, favorite ways to dress or favorite gifts you received, favorite gifts you gave, favorite memories. How about nighttime dreams? You have a favorite of those? And any other favorites that you can think of. List the important memories about you that you don't want to be forgotten. What are your greatest strengths and gifts? List jobs that you've had or volunteer positions, but memorable work experiences. Important work values that you learned because you went to work, or memorable coworkers and important things they taught you. List those out. What things make you laugh? What funny things do you remember doing? What things made you cry? And then any other thoughts that randomly come to you during this time. One of the things that we find when we're writing in our journals and we're writing with a tagline or a query or a question that's prompting us to think about certain things is that one set of stories that we start to answer that question or that prompt for turns into a whole other story or set of stories that cascade right out of the original, so that it's sometimes you feel like you can't stop writing, that one thing just kind of leads to another. Many people complain of not being able to remember these kinds of childhood events, just like a lot of people say, I never remember my dreams when I wake up. But you'd be surprised when somebody does finally get a glimmer of what dream they had and they start to talk about that small glimmer. It opens up a whole new place in us that starts to remember more of that dream. It's the same with these stories. You may not think you have a firm grasp on your childhood, but when you start talking about some of the nuance from your childhood, it kicks in, and other memories come back as well. Then have a section or a category in your journal for pearls of wisdom, those favorite things that people said or that you said that seem like they are Chinese fortune cookies for the way life should be run. They're nuggets of truth, right? It could be something as simple as, I always said, floss daily, you only get one set of teeth, right? Or, I think you've heard many people say, hold your kids or hug your kids as often as you can, particularly after tragedies. People say that a lot, hug your team close tonight, or hug your family close tonight, or hold your kids close tonight. So what are other phrases like that have gotten you through life? And then, are there notes and pictures that you'd like to pull together? Are there special letters that you got from somebody that you want to tuck in there in your journal or glue it in there? We want to talk a little bit about the feelings surrounding illness and death, and this can be a whole separate section too. You want to go gently into your heart, because this is in a very emotional time, right? Because this is part of your core journey now. What deaths do you remember, or what questions do you have about deaths that your family, your friends experienced? What are your experiences with your illness and disease? How is it currently to live with this terminal illness that you have? When did you get sick? How did you find out about your illness? What kinds of physical and emotional changes have you been through because of it? How did things go for you when you found out your illness was terminal? How about since then? What's gotten you through the difficult feelings of this illness? Have you learned anything from being ill? What feelings are hardest to face? What feelings have been endearing? I know many times people talk about the dependency that they have on people that they never would have allowed themselves to shine forth in their life at any other given time. And they kind of wince with a sense of sorrow that this joy that they have by depending on others is not really a part of their history, that it's something new that they've learned. And obviously they're very appreciative they have it now, but there is kind of a bittersweet sense to some of the things that we learn when we recognize our life is coming to a close. Talk about dreams that you had during your sleep, or any joys, uh, additional joys that you might have had, or have you had unusual occurrences? What do you want to tell people about living and dying? How do you feel about the care you've been getting? How do you feel about those who come to see you? How do you feel about the life you've lived? Have any of your feelings about death changed, and how? Have you learned to alleviate how have you learned to alleviate suffering and pain, either physical or emotional at this time? And then there should be a section that you could identify some um, items that you would like for your funeral plans, right? Are there specific rites that you would like to occur in your life before your death or just after? How do you want your body to be interred, buried, or cremated? Are there any specific instructions that you have for the cremation or the interment? What would you like to be wearing? What hymns or music would you like there to be at your service? How about readings or scriptures or other texts? What would you like the service to be like? What funeral home do you want to use? What clergy or what officiants or what people do you want there? Do you want anybody else to speak? Are there any specific or special prayers you want to use? Do you have other special comments or directions or requests? Any photos that you want to be on hand that day? Anything you want to say to those people who will be there? Did you plan on donating your organs? And if so, can you share where they are to be shared with? Do you own a burial plot? And if you do, where? So, this is a comprehensive look at all of the aspects that patients and families began sharing and talking about that were very important to them as they considered the meaning and the duration of their life, who they are, where they've been, what they've done, and who has been a part of that. And again, so we talk about it in terms of family and friends and faith or spirituality, some pearls of wisdom, stories about your life and things that you've done yourself. And then we've looked at also our illness and our perceptions and conceptions of death, and then finally funeral planning. So all of these, this great amalgam of information is all good grist for the mill for putting in your journal and writing about not only what you think about it, but how you feel about it and who are the people that are involved in that set of feelings and that set of thoughts. Remember, how you organize this is totally yours. You can select one question from one topic to deal with on a daily basis and just write it out, or you can go through and develop those itemized categories in your journal, and under the heading and a couple of pages afterward, you can write about the things that are asked for in the questions. So I hope you've enjoyed the ability to take a look at a skill that is deeply moving. And remember that with all of the rest of the classes that we've shared the same information, that one, your journal is not just a place to dump out how you think or you feel or you intuit or you hope or you dream, right? It's not just a place to lay that out, although it is that. It is also a place to go and receive nourishment, to look back and say, who am I? How can I experience my sense of self over time? And so we want to not only write in our journals, but we also want to review them. It's very important to put it maybe in the front of your journal, who you want the journal to go to after you're gone, so that there is somebody designated in the family who can keep track of this, can hold on to it, and can be the memory bearer for your family. Thank you so much for joining us in this series, and talk to your staff about other series that we may offer as well for patients and families who are on hospice services and are looking at dealing with end of life issues on a routine and daily basis. Thanks. Take care.